The crystal towers of Nexus Prime gleamed like diamonds against the purple sky, their surfaces catching the light of twin suns and scattering rainbows across the floating gardens. For 3,000 years, the Valari had built their civilization in perfect harmony with nature. Their cities floated above pristine oceans, connected by bridges of living light that pulsed with the rhythm of their collective consciousness. Ambassador Thylon stood on the highest platform of the central spire, his crystalline form shifting, from deep blue to worried amber as he watched the horizon. Something dark was spreading across the distant continents, consuming everything in its path. The elegant spires that had stood for millennia were collapsing, replaced by writhing masses. Of black and purple flesh, the Krovan swarm had arrived 3 days ago. At first, the Valari Council had been confident. Their defensive barriers had protected them from meteor strikes and solar flares for generations. But these creatures were different. They ate through energy shields like they were made of air. They consumed metal, crystal, and living tissue with equal hunger. Worse, they learned from everything they devoured. Thylon's advisor, Harmonizer Keltar, approached with trembling steps. Her inner light flickered like a candle in a storm. Ambassador, the outer colonies have gone silent. Floating City 7th has fallen. The creatures have adapted to our sonic weapons. They now use our own frequencies against us. Through the transparent walls of the spire, Thylon could see streams of refugees fleeing toward the central cities. But there was nowhere to run. The swarm moved faster than their fastest ships. It consumed faster than they could evacuate. In 72 hours, it would reach the capital. "How many evacuation ships do we have ready?" Thylon asked, though he already knew the answer would not be enough. 47 vessels. They can carry perhaps 10,000 Valari to the outer systems. Keltar's voice carried the harmonics of despair. There are 12 million citizens in the capital alone. Thylon closed his eyes and felt the collective consciousness of his people. 3 billion Valari minds, all singing the same song of terror and confusion. They had never known war. Their entire civilization was built on the principle that intelligence and harmony could solve any problem. But the Krovan swarm was not a problem to be solved. It was a force of nature, as unstoppable as entropy itself. "We must send the signal," Thylon said finally. Keltar's crystal form flashed bright red with shock. "Ambassador, the Council voted against contact with the outer species. We agreed that the crude beings of the galaxy's rim were too primitive to understand our civilization." "Our civilization will not exist in 4 days," Thylon replied. "Pride is a luxury we can no longer afford." He walked to the communication array at the center of the spire. The device had never been used for interstellar broadcast. The Valari had always believed they were alone in the universe among truly intelligent species. But recent long-range surveys had detected dozens of civilizations in the outer spiral arms. Most appeared to be young races, barely capable of spaceflight. Some seemed to be engaged in constant warfare with each other. The Valari had dismissed them as evolutionary failures. Now those failures might be their only hope. Thylon placed his hands on the crystal matrix and felt the network's power flow through him. Every Valari on the planet could access this system, but only an ambassador could use it for galaxy-wide transmission. The energy requirements were enormous, enough to power a city for a year. "This is Ambassador Thylon of the Valari Collective, broadcasting on all frequencies from Nexus Prime in the Kepler 442 system." His voice carried the harmonic undertones that made Valari speech so beautiful, though he doubted any other species would appreciate the artistry. "We are a peaceful civilization facing extinction. An entity known as the Krovan Swarm is consuming our world. We have no weapons capable of stopping them. We have no experience with warfare. Any species capable of receiving this message, we beg for your assistance. We are dying. The swarm consumes all. Please help us." The message went out at faster-than-light speeds, carried by quantum entanglement across the galaxy. Thailand felt the network's power drain as the signal reached farther and farther into space. He poured his people's remaining energy reserves into the broadcast, ensuring it would reach even the most distant civilizations. 47 light-years away, the signal reached the Galactic Coalition's monitoring station orbiting Kepler 442b. Communications Officer Blake Richardson was finishing his night shift when every alarm in the facility began screaming. The incoming transmission was unlike anything in their database. The power levels were off the charts. The harmonic complexity suggested a level of technology that shouldn't exist. Blake ran the signal through the translation matrix, but the computer kept generating error messages. The language was completely unknown, but the emotional undertones were universal. Fear, desperation, a plea for help from beings who had never had to ask for help before. Control, this is Station 7. I'm picking up a distress signal from an unknown species. The source appears to be— Wait, that can't be right. Blake checked his instruments again. Control, the signal is coming from inside the Nexeth system. That system is listed as uninhabited in our database. The response came back immediately. Station 7, forward that signal to Earth Defense Command. Priority Alpha. Blake's hands shook as he routed the transmission. Priority Alpha meant potential threat to human colonies. The Galactic Coalition had standing orders to investigate any unknown technology that appeared in their space. But this felt different. This felt like first contact with something beyond their understanding. Aboard the flagship UES Retribution, Captain Marcus Webb reviewed the intercepted signal for the third time. His senior staff sat around the holographic display, watching the computer's analysis scroll past in columns of data that made no sense. So, let me understand this, Webb said. An unknown alien species with technology superior to ours is asking for help against something called the Krovan Swarm? His tactical officer, Commander Lisa Torres, nodded grimly. That's the summary, sir. Long-range sensors confirm massive energy signatures in the Nexeth system. Whatever is happening there, it's big enough to be detected from 50 light-years away. And we've never heard of either species before, the Valari or this Krovan Swarm. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the fleet's xenobiologist, spoke up from her position at the science station. The Nexeth system has been marked as uninhabited for decades. Our last survey mission reported no signs of intelligent life. Either the Valari are incredibly good at hiding, or they developed their civilization very recently. Webb studied the tactical display. The Nexeth system was located along one of the major hyperspace routes leading to human space. If something hostile was operating there, it could threaten a dozen human colonies. But if the Valari were as advanced as their signal suggested, making contact could revolutionize human technology. Sir, Torres added, I should mention that we've detected similar energy signatures in 3 nearby systems over the past month. Each one went dark shortly after the readings appeared. The implications hit Webb like a physical blow. If the Krovan Swarm was moving through space consuming entire civilizations, Earth might be next on the list. The human colonies in the outer rim were lightly defended. They would never survive an attack from something that could threaten a species more advanced than humanity. Webb made his decision. Send a message to Admiral Morrison. Request permission to deploy the expeditionary force. We have a first contact situation that could become an extinction-level threat. As the quantum transmitter sent his message toward Earth, Webb looked out at the stars and wondered what humanity was about to encounter. In his 30 years of military service, he had fought pirates, separatists, and hostile aliens. But he had never faced something that could make an advanced civilization send a galaxy-wide cry for help. He was about to find out what had scared beings who built cities from living light. Admiral Kate Morrison stood in the war room deep beneath Geneva, studying the holographic display that showed the largest military mobilization in human history. 200 ships from every nation on Earth were gathering at the Luna staging area. 50,000 soldiers, Marines, and support personnel were loading onto transport vessels. Enough firepower to level a planet was being prepared for immediate deployment. Admiral, "We're receiving confirmation from all fleet commanders," reported General Hayes, her second in command. "The expeditionary force will be ready for hyperspace jump in 18 hours. Morrison nodded, but her attention remained focused on the intercepted Valari transmission playing on loop. The computer had finally managed a rough translation, but the emotional content was clearer than the words. Pure terror from beings who had never known fear. "Any word from our deep space sensors?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am. Long-range reconnaissance confirms the Krovan swarm has consumed 3 star systems in the past month. The pattern suggests they're moving toward inhabited space at approximately 50 light-years per day." Morrison felt a chill run down her spine. At that rate, the swarm could reach Earth's outer colonies in less than 2 weeks. But there was something else that bothered her. The Valari signal had mentioned they were a peaceful civilization with no experience in warfare. If they were as advanced as their technology suggested, how had they survived this long without any form of military? "General, I want every available xenobiologist and first contact specialist on this mission. We're not just going to fight. We're going to learn." 12 hours later, the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Nexus system. What they found was beyond anything they had imagined. The Valari homeworld was a masterpiece of crystal and light, with cities that floated in perfect, geometric harmony above pristine oceans. But half the planet was covered in a writhing black mass that pulsed with alien life. Captain Webb stood on the bridge of the Retribution, watching his sensors try to make sense of what they were seeing. "Dr. Vasquez, what am I looking at?" The xenobiologist was frantically running scans from every instrument on the ship. "Captain, the Krovan swarm appears to be a biological entity of unprecedented complexity. It's not just attacking the planet, it's absorbing it. Every structure it consumes becomes part of its mass. It's literally eating the civilization and incorporating it into itself. Life signs? Approximately 4 billion Valari remain on the planet, concentrated in the areas the swarm hasn't reached yet. But sir, that's not the most disturbing part. The swarm is learning. Each section that consumes Valari technology becomes more sophisticated. It's adapting their defensive systems and turning them into weapons." Before Webb could respond, his communications officer spoke up. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from a Valari vessel. They're requesting permission to come aboard." Webb looked at the tactical display. A single ship was approaching from the direction of the planet. It looked more like a work of art than a spacecraft, all flowing curves and crystalline surfaces that seemed to bend light around them. "Grant permission. Send Commander Torres and a full diplomatic team to the shuttle bay." 30 minutes later, Torres stood in the shuttle bay, watching the Valari vessel settle onto the deck with impossible grace. The airlock opened with a sound like wind chimes, and 3 figures emerged that took her breath away. The Valari were tall, easily 7 feet in height, with bodies that appeared to be made of living crystal. Light moved through their translucent forms in patterns that shifted with their emotions. The leader's inner illumination pulsed with deep blue, while the 2 companions flickered between green and amber. "I am Prime Resonant Cathara," the leader spoke in accented but clear English. "I come seeking the beings who answered our call for help." Torres stepped forward, trying to hide her amazement. "I'm Commander Torres of the Earth Defense Fleet. Welcome aboard the UES Retribution." Cathara's light shifted to surprised purple. "Earth Defense Fleet? You are from the 3rd planet of the Sol system? But our surveys indicated that world was inhabited by primitive mammals." Torres felt her jaw tighten. "Those primitive mammals have come to help you. The meeting that followed in the ship's conference room was unlike any first contact scenario in human protocols." Cathara and her companions were clearly struggling to reconcile their preconceptions with reality. They had expected their saviors to be another advanced crystalline species, not creatures made of flesh and bone who carried weapons everywhere they went. "Your vessels are crude constructions of metal and ceramic," Cathara observed, her light shifting to disdainful orange. How did you achieve faster-than-light travel with such primitive materials? Captain Webb, who had joined the meeting, exchanged glances with Torres. Sometimes the best solutions are simple ones. We learned to work with what we had. Dr. Vasquez leaned forward with her scanner readings. Prime resonant. We need to understand the nature of the Krovan swarm. Our sensors indicate it's not just one organism, but billions working in perfect coordination. How did they find your world? Cathara's companions flickered with fear patterns as she answered. The swarm moves from system to system, consuming everything in its path. We detected their approach 6 months ago, but we believed our defensive barriers would protect us. We have never needed weapons. Violence is unknown to our people. Unknown? Webb couldn't hide his disbelief. In 3,000 years of civilization, you've never had war, crime, any form of conflict? Our minds are connected through the harmonic network. We share thoughts and emotions. Individual violence is impossible when you feel your victim's pain as your own. Cathara's light dimmed with sadness. But the swarm feels nothing. It consumes without hatred, without anger, without any emotion we can understand. It simply eats. Suddenly, every alarm on the ship began sounding. The tactical officer's voice echoed through the speakers. Captain, to the bridge immediately. We have multiple contacts dropping out of hyperspace. Webb and Torres rushed to the bridge, leaving Dr. Vasquez to continue the interview. What they found on the main display made both officers stop in their tracks. The Krovan mothership was emerging from hyperspace like a nightmare made real. It was easily the size of a small moon, its surface covered in what looked like breathing tissue. Thousands of smaller vessels were detaching from its bulk, each one heading toward different targets in the system. Weapons status, Webb barked. All. Weapons online, sir. But Captain, the size of that thing, our entire fleet combined wouldn't equal 1% of its mass. Webb studied the tactical display as the smaller Krovan vessels spread out through the system. They were fast, faster than anything in the human fleet, but they were also chaotic, moving without any apparent coordination. That gave him an idea. Torres, get back to Dr. Vasquez. I want to know everything she's learned about swarm behavior in the next 10 minutes. Tactical. Begin charging the Ragnarok array. His tactical officer's face went pale. Sir, the Ragnarok array is classified as a planet-killer weapon. Deployment requires authorization from... I'm authorizing it. Webb cut him off. Send a priority. Message to Admiral Morrison. Tell her we're facing an extinction-level threat and requesting permission to use all available assets. As the human fleet moved into defensive positions around the Valari homeworld, something was stirring deep within the Krovan mothership. The consumption of 3-star systems had fed it well, but the appearance of these new vessels puzzled the consciousness that guided the swarm. The newcomers' ships were small and poorly constructed, but there was something about their energy, signatures that felt dangerous. For the first time in 1,000 years, the overmind that controlled the Krovan swarm felt something approaching curiosity. These creatures from the third planet were different from the usual prey. They carried weapons designed not just to kill, but to cause maximum destruction. Their ships were arranged in attack formations rather than defensive patterns. Most interesting of all, they had come to fight for strangers. In all its eons of consuming civilizations, the Overmind had never encountered a species that would risk extinction to defend others. It decided to test these newcomers before adding them to the swarm's collective memory. The hunt was about to begin, and for the first time, the Overmind was not certain of the outcome. These humans felt different. They felt dangerous. They felt like something that had spent millennia learning how to survive against impossible odds. The Krovan swarm was about to learn why Earth was classified as a death world and why humanity had earned the right to carry weapons among the stars. The first wave of Krovan hunter-killers hit the human fleet like a living asteroid storm. Each creature was the size of a fighter jet, covered in chitinous armor that seemed to absorb energy weapons. They moved through space with impossible agility, their bodies shifting and adapting as they closed the distance to their targets. Colonel Ryan Mitchell watched from the bridge of the assault carrier UES Devastator as his pilots engaged the creatures in three-dimensional combat, unlike anything in human military history. The Krovan didn't fly ships, they were ships. Living vessels that could think and react faster than any computer. Ghost Squadron, break left and engage targets of opportunity, Mitchell commanded through the comm system. Remember these things, adapt to our weapons. Don't use the same attack twice. Lieutenant David Park pulled his fighter into a crushing turn that would have liquefied most alien species. The gravitational forces that pressed him into his seat were nothing compared to what he had endured during training on Earth's high-gravity training stations. As a Krovan hunter-killer bore down on him, Park fired a concentrated burst from his plasma cannons, then immediately switched to kinetic rounds. The creature's armor absorbed the plasma without effect, but the solid projectiles punched through its adaptive defenses. Dark fluid sprayed from the wounds as the hunter-killer tumbled away, but Park noticed something that made his blood run cold. The other Krovan in the area were already changing, their armor thickening in response to the kinetic attack. Control. This is Ghost Leader. The enemy is learning from our attacks in real time. Each one we hit makes the others stronger. From the flag bridge of the Retribution, Captain Webb coordinated the battle with the cold precision that had made him Earth's youngest fleet commander. His tactical display showed the positions of 200 human ships arranged in a complex three-dimensional formation that looked chaotic to outside observers, but followed patterns learned from centuries of naval warfare. Artemis, show me the swarm's command structure, Webb ordered. The ship's strategic AI materialized as a hologram of a woman in military uniform. Artemis had been designed to process battlefield information faster than any human mind, but even she seemed overwhelmed by the complexity of the Krovan attack patterns. Captain, the enemy appears to operate on a distributed command model. Each individual unit shares information instantaneously with the collective. However, there are periodic synchronization pulses emanating from the mothership. If we could disrupt those signals, do it. All ships, prepare to execute Symphony Protocol. Aboard the cruiser UES Harmony, Commander Holly Bennett received the order with grim satisfaction. Symphony Protocol was humanity's most classified battle strategy, developed after studying how Earth's natural disasters created harmony from chaos. Every ship in the fleet would begin broadcasting on specific frequencies, creating a network of electromagnetic interference designed to overwhelm enemy communications. But first, they had to survive the initial assault. The Krovan mothership hung in space like a malignant moon, its surface rippling with organic activity. From observation ports scattered across its hull, the Overmind watched the battle unfold with growing interest. These humans fought unlike any species in its vast memory. They used their ships like extensions of their own bodies, moving with intuitive coordination that no artificial intelligence could replicate. More intriguing was their approach to casualties. When a human fighter was damaged, nearby vessels would immediately move to protect it, even at the cost of tactical advantage. When a ship was destroyed, the surrounding units became more aggressive, not less. The Overmind had consumed species that fought to the death, but never one that seemed to gain strength from loss. One human ship in particular caught its attention. The assault carrier Devastator was launching small craft directly at the Krovan-controlled areas of the planet's surface. The Overmind sent a cluster of hunter-killers to intercept, expecting the humans to recall their landing force. Instead, the entire human fleet shifted to provide cover for the descending craft. They were attempting a ground assault on a swarm-controlled world. The concept was so suicidal that the Overmind initially dismissed it as a mistake. Colonel Mitchell rode the drop pod through Nexith Prime's atmosphere like a meteor wrapped in ablative armor. Around him, 5,000 human soldiers made the same descent, their pods equipped with enough firepower to level a city block. The Krovan had adapted to orbital bombardment, but they had never faced an enemy crazy enough to land troops in the middle of their feeding grounds. The pod slammed into the corrupted surface of what had once been a Valari garden city. Mitchell kicked open the hatch and emerged into a nightmare landscape of writhing black flesh and twisted crystal structures. The Krovan had not simply destroyed the city, they had absorbed it, turning elegant spires into feeding tentacles and defensive positions. 7th Shock Division, form up and advance by fire teams, Mitchell barked into his comm system. Remember your training. These things adapt, so keep them guessing. Private Sarah Kim unloaded her flamethrower into a cluster of Krovan drones that erupted from the corrupted ground. The creatures shrieked as they burned, their adaptive armor useless against the ancient terror of fire. But she could already see other drones in the distance developing heat-resistant carapaces. Sergeant James Crawford provided covering fire with his sonic disruptor, using frequencies specifically designed to interfere with the Krovan nervous system. The creatures stumbled and writhed under the audio assault, but Crawford knew it was only a matter of minutes before they adapted to this attack as well. The key to fighting the swarm was speed and variety. Never use the same weapon twice. Never attack from the same position. Never give them time to analyze and counter. It was exactly the kind of warfare that humans had spent millennia perfecting against each other. Dr. Elena Vasquez monitored the ground assault from the Retribution's science station while simultaneously analyzing the Krovan specimens that the Marines were collecting. What she found in their genetic structure confirmed her worst fears. Captain, the Krovan aren't just adapting to our weapons. They're incorporating our technology. Every ship they destroy, every soldier they consume makes them more like us. If this continues, they'll eventually develop human-level intelligence while retaining their hive mind coordination. Webb studied the tactical display as more Krovan reinforcements poured out of the mothership. The human fleet was holding its own, but barely. They were outnumbered 1,000 to 1, and the enemy was learning from every exchange. Artemis, status on Symphony Protocol? All ships report ready, Captain. However, I should warn you that this level of electromagnetic interference will also affect our own communications. Do it anyway. Sometimes you have to go deaf to make your enemy blind. The order went out across the human fleet, and 200 ships began broadcasting on carefully coordinated frequencies. The result was a symphony of electronic warfare that turned the space around Nexith Prime into a storm of static and interference. Krovan hunter-killers suddenly found themselves cut off from the hive mind, their perfect coordination dissolving into chaos. But the humans had trained for this. Every pilot, every gunner, every Marine knew how to operate independently when communications failed. It was a skill learned from centuries of fighting on a planet where natural disasters could cut off contact with command at any moment. The Overmind felt the disruption like a physical blow. For the first time in eons, parts of its consciousness were isolated, cut off from the collective. Individual Krovan units began making mistakes, attacking their own forces or ignoring obvious tactical opportunities. But worse than the tactical disruption was the psychological impact. The humans had demonstrated that they understood the swarm's greatest strength and had developed a counter for it. They were not the primitive mammals the Overmind had expected. They were predators who had studied their prey and prepared accordingly. Deep in the mothership's core, something ancient and powerful began to stir. The Overmind was calling upon resources it had not needed for 1,000 years. These humans represented a threat unlike any the swarm had encountered, and they would require the full attention of the collective consciousness that had consumed 10,000 worlds. The real battle was about to begin, and for the first time since its creation, the Krovan swarm was not certain of victory. These creatures from the third planet fought like something that had already accepted death and decided to make their sacrifice count. They fought like beings who had spent their entire evolutionary history learning how to kill things bigger than themselves. The Overmind's call rippled across the galaxy like a wave of malevolent intent. On 17 different worlds, Krovan swarms that had been methodically consuming local civilizations suddenly stopped their feeding and turned toward the Nexus system. The greatest concentration of the species in 1,000 years was converging on a single point in space. Prime Resonant. Kithara watched the tactical display aboard the Retribution with growing horror. Each approaching fleet was larger than the one currently attacking her homeworld. When they arrived, the combined swarm would outnumber the human fleet by more than 1,000,000 to 1. "Captain Webb, surely you must see that the situation is hopeless," she said, her crystalline form flickering with patterns of despair. "My people have prepared evacuation ships. We can save perhaps 50,000 Valari before the final assault begins." Webb studied the display with the same calm expression he had worn since the battle began. Around him, his bridge crew continued their duties with the mechanical precision of professionals who had accepted their fate hours ago. "Prime Resonant, how many Valari are left on your homeworld?" "Approximately 3 billion. But, Captain, we cannot." "Then we're not evacuating." "Anyone." Webb turned to face the alien diplomat, and Kithara saw something in his eyes that she had never encountered before. It was not hatred or anger, but something far more disturbing. It was the absolute certainty of someone who had already made peace with death. "I don't understand," Kithara whispered. "Your people have spent 3,000 years building the most beautiful civilization in the galaxy," Webb replied. "My people have spent the same amount of time learning how to kill things that are bigger and stronger than we are. Today, we find out which skill set is more useful." In the CIC deep within the Retribution, Admiral Morrison's hologram materialized, with the encrypted orders that Webb had been expecting. Her image flickered with quantum interference from the ongoing battle, but her voice was crystal clear. "Captain, you are authorized to implement Ragnarok Protocol. God help us all." Webb nodded grimly. "Understood, Admiral. We'll make it count." As Morrison's image faded, Webb turned to his senior staff. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're not here to win a battle. We're here to commit genocide on a galactic scale. The Krovan swarm has terrorized civilizations for millennia. Today, we end that threat permanently." Commander Torres looked up from her tactical station. "Sir, the engineering teams report that all devices have been successfully deployed. We can initiate stellar ignition on your command." Dr. Vasquez, who had been monitoring the Krovan communications, spoke up with barely controlled excitement. "Captain, I've been analyzing the swarm's response patterns. They're not just calling in reinforcements, they're actually afraid. The Overmind is experiencing something it hasn't felt in eons. It's facing an enemy it doesn't understand." On the planet's surface, Colonel Mitchell and his ground forces were implementing the most dangerous phase of the human plan. They were not trying to hold territory or protect civilians. They were systematically planting devices throughout the Krovan-infested areas, each one designed to interact with Nexeth Prime's star in ways that defied conventional physics. Major. Rebecca Stone led her commando team through the twisted remains of what had once been a Valari science facility. The Krovan had absorbed the building's structure, turning crystal laboratories into pulsing flesh chambers, but the underground sections remained partially intact. "Package 7 is in position," Stone reported as her team activated another stellar engineering device. Moving to Package 8. The devices were marvels of human engineering, developed from decades of studying how to weaponize their own solar system. Each one was designed to create a resonance cascade in the star's core, turning Nexeth Prime's sun into a controlled supernova that would sterilize the system while leaving the planets intact. But the plan required perfect timing and coordination across multiple star systems. More importantly, it required someone to manually trigger the final sequence from within the star's corona, a suicide mission that would make the ultimate sacrifice meaningful. The Overmind watched the human activities with growing unease. Their ground forces were not behaving like any invasion army in its vast memory. They ignored strategic positions, avoided direct confrontation when possible, and seemed more interested in placing strange devices than in conquering territory. Worse, their space fleet was actively drawing more Krovan forces to the system. Instead of fleeing from the approaching reinforcements, they were sending targeting data to help guide the converging swarms to their location. It was behavior so suicidal that the Overmind initially dismissed it as a species-wide death wish. But these humans had demonstrated too much tactical sophistication to be dismissed. They were planning something that the combined intelligence of 10,000 consumed civilizations could not comprehend. Flight leader Alex Romano pulled his fighter through an impossible barrel roll, avoiding the acid spit of a Krovan bioship while simultaneously launching a spread of plasma torpedoes. His squadron had been in continuous combat for 18 hours, and their losses were mounting, but every pilot continued to fly with the same aggressive precision that had characterized the entire human force. Control. This is Raptor Squadron. We're down to 30% strength, but the targeting packages are still being delivered on schedule. Webb's voice crackled through the comm system. Understood, Raptor Squadron. All units prepare for final phase. We're about to find out if humans can do the impossible. Across the fleet, the message was repeated with variations, but the meaning was always the same. The moment of truth had arrived. Every sacrifice, every loss, every desperate gamble had led to this single point in time and space. The final Krovan reinforcements dropped out of hyperspace like a plague of locusts, their combined mass dwarfing anything the galaxy had seen since the ancient wars of extinction. 17 separate swarm fleets, each capable of consuming entire star systems, now focused their attention on the tiny human force that had dared to challenge their supremacy. But as the Krovan forces moved into attack formation, something unexpected happened. The humans did not retreat or assume defensive positions. Instead, every ship in their fleet turned toward the Krovan mothership and accelerated to ramming speed. It was not a retreat. It was not a desperate last stand. It was a coordinated charge by beings who had already accepted death and chosen to make their end as meaningful as possible. In that moment, the Overmind experienced something it had not felt since its creation. For the first time in its existence, the collective consciousness that had consumed thousands of civilizations felt genuine fear. These humans were not trying to survive. They were trying to take as many enemies with them as possible. They were fighting like something that had evolved on a planet so dangerous that extinction was a constant threat, where only the most adaptable and ruthless predators could survive. They were fighting like beings who had spent their entire history learning how to kill things that were bigger, stronger, and more numerous than themselves. The Krovan swarm was about to learn why humanity had earned the right to carry weapons among the stars and why Earth was classified as a death world by every intelligent species in the galaxy. The real battle was just beginning, and the fate of countless civilizations hung in the balance. But in the deepest core of the human fleet, Captain Webb smiled grimly as he prepared to trigger the stellar ignition sequence. The Krovan had made one fatal mistake. They had given humanity something to protect, and there was nothing more dangerous in the universe than humans with a cause worth dying for. The space around Nexus Prime became a hurricane of destruction as 17 Krovan swarm fleets converged on the human force. Ships the size of cities launched waves of biomechanical nightmares that had consumed entire civilizations. The combined mass of the Krovan forces was so vast that their gravitational pull began affecting the orbits of the system's outer planets. Captain Webb stood on the bridge of the Retribution, watching his tactical display as the human fleet formed into its final configuration, 200 ships against 10 million Krovan vessels. The odds were so overwhelming that any sane military computer would have refused to calculate the probability of victory, but humans had never been particularly sane. All ships, this is Retribution Actual, Webb broadcast on the fleet-wide channel. Today, we face an enemy that has terrorized the galaxy for millennia. They have consumed thousands of worlds and billions of innocent beings. They believe that superior numbers and adaptive biology make them invincible. They're about to learn what happens when an unstoppable force meets beings too stupid to know when they're beaten. Chief Engineer Sandra Kim made her final adjustments to the stellar ignition sequence from the Retribution's engine room. The devices planted throughout the system were responding perfectly, creating a resonance network that would turn Nexith's star into a weapon of unprecedented power. But someone had to trigger the final sequence manually from within the star's corona. "Captain, the solar engineering array is ready for activation," Kim reported. "But sir, whoever triggers the final sequence won't be coming back." Webb nodded grimly. "I know, Chief. Send my personal authorization to all volunteers." Within minutes, Webb's comm system was flooded with responses. Every captain in the fleet had volunteered for the suicide mission. Every pilot, every Marine, every engineer wanted the honor of making the final sacrifice. It was exactly what Webb had expected from a species that had spent millennia learning how to die well. Prime Resonant Cathara watched the human preparations with a mixture of awe and horror. Her crystalline form flickered through every color in the spectrum as she struggled to comprehend what she was witnessing. "Captain Webb, your entire species has offered to die for beings they met 3 days ago. This is beyond our understanding. Why would you sacrifice everything for strangers?" Webb looked at the Valari diplomat with the tired eyes of someone who had seen too much war. "Because somebody has to. Because if we don't stop them here, they'll consume your people, then ours, then everyone else in the galaxy. Sometimes the only way to save what you love is to be willing to lose it." The first wave of Krovan bioships slammed into the human formation like living asteroids. The creatures had adapted to every weapon humanity had used against them. Their chitinous armor now proof against plasma, kinetic rounds, and energy beams. But the humans had one more surprise waiting. Commander Torres activated the fleet's final weapons system, something so classified that only a dozen people in human space knew it existed. Every human ship began broadcasting a specific frequency, pattern, one that had been developed from studying the neural networks of Earth's most dangerous predators. The frequency was fear itself, translated into electromagnetic radiation. It was the pattern that activated every survival instinct evolution had ever created. It was the sound of a predator so dangerous that even other predators fled from it. The effect on the Krovan was immediate and devastating. Creatures that had never known fear suddenly found their nervous systems flooded with primal terror. The hive mind that had coordinated their attacks for millennia began to fracture as individual units tried to flee from a threat they could not understand. But the Overmind was not so easily defeated. Deep within the largest mothership, the collective consciousness that guided the swarm began to sacrifice parts of itself to maintain control. Entire sections of the ship went dark as the Overmind consumed its own biomass to power a counter-frequency that would restore order to the swarm. The battle became a war of competing neural patterns, with both sides pouring energy into signals, designed to control the minds of millions of creatures. But humans had one advantage that the Overmind had not anticipated. They were used to fighting while afraid. Fear was humanity's oldest companion. They had learned to think clearly while terrified, to make rational decisions while their nervous systems screamed at them to run. It was a skill learned from living on a planet where everything wanted to kill them. Colonel Mitchell and his ground teams reached their final objective as the space battle raged overhead. The central Krovan processing facility was a nightmare of organic architecture, all pulsing walls and breathing corridors that led to the planet's core. This was where the swarm stored the consciousness of every civilization it had consumed. "Ghost Team, we're at the primary node," Mitchell reported as his team placed the final stellar engineering device. "Beginning activation sequence now," the Device came online with a harmonic resonance that seemed to make reality itself vibrate. Deep beneath the planet's surface, quantum entanglement fields began linking Nexus Prime's core to its star. The planet was becoming a single massive weapon, designed to channel stellar energy in ways that would sterilize the system while leaving the worlds intact. Sergeant Maria Rodriguez provided covering fire as waves of Krovan defenders poured from the facility's organic passages. Her pulse rifle cut through adapted armor with rounds designed to cause maximum cellular disruption. Behind her, Private Tommy Chen deployed sonic charges that turned the facility's own bioacoustic systems against it. "Charges set," Chen reported. "We've got maybe 10 minutes before this whole place comes down." But the Overmind had finally understood what the humans were attempting. They were not trying to win a conventional battle. They were trying to turn the star itself into a weapon. The realization sent waves of panic through the collective consciousness as it comprehended the true scope of human ambition. These creatures were not just willing to die to stop the swarm. They were willing to destroy an entire solar system to ensure that not a single Krovan organism survived. Admiral Morrison's voice crackled through the quantum communicator from Earth. "All units, this is Terra Command. Long-range sensors show Krovan reinforcements inbound from across the galaxy. Whatever you're going to do it now." Webb looked at his tactical display one final time. The human fleet was down to fewer than 100 operational ships, but they had accomplished their mission. The stellar engineering array was online, the Krovan fleets were concentrated in a single system, and the frequency weapons were keeping the swarm disorganized long enough to complete the final phase. Chief Kim, transfer all power to the stellar ignition system. All ships, prepare for final burn. We're going into the sun. The remaining human vessels turned as one toward Nexeth's star, their engines burning at maximum power. They were not retreating. They were not fleeing. They were diving directly into the stellar corona to manually trigger the sequence that would turn the star into a controlled supernova. The Overmind watched in horror as the human ships accelerated towards certain death. It finally understood what it was facing. These were not rational beings making calculated military decisions. These were predators from a death world, creatures so accustomed to extinction-level threats that they had learned to weaponize their own destruction. As the first human ships entered the star's outer atmosphere, Captain Webb made his final transmission to the galaxy. "This is Captain Marcus Webb of the Earth Defense Fleet. To any civilization receiving this message, know that when you called for help, humanity answered. The Krovan swarm ends here. Remember us." The star's surface erupted in a cascade of controlled fusion reactions as the human ships triggered the final sequence. The stellar engineering devices planted throughout the system created a resonance wave that turned the star into a precisely directed weapon. The explosion was not random destruction, but carefully channeled energy designed to sterilize every Krovan organism in the system while leaving the planets habitable. The shockwave expanded at the speed of light, carrying with it a frequency pattern that would replicate across hyperspace networks throughout the galaxy. Every Krovan spore, every dormant egg, every hidden colony would be sterilized by the expanding wave of lethal radiation. Prime Resonant Kythera watched from a Valari evacuation ship as the human fleet disappeared into the star that had become humanity's funeral pyre. Her people's homeworld was saved, the crystal cities already beginning to regenerate as the Krovan biomass dissolved under the stellar radiation. But the cost had been unimaginable. An entire species had chosen extinction to save strangers they had never met. As the stellar shockwave faded and normal space returned to the Nexeth system, Kythera received reports from across the galaxy. The frequency wave had worked perfectly. Every known Krovan colony had gone silent. Every swarm fleet had simply stopped moving and dissolved into component atoms. Humanity had kept its promise. The galaxy was safe. In the aftermath, as rescue, Ships from a dozen civilizations arrived to help with reconstruction. Cathera found herself standing in the ruins of her people's greatest city. A monument had already been erected there, built from fused crystal and metal debris from the human fleet. The inscription was simple, carved in the common galactic script so that any species could read it. Here stood humanity. When the galaxy called for help, they answered. When darkness threatened all life, they became the light. Remember them, for they will not come again. The Krovan swarm was extinct. 17 star systems were free from a threat that had terrorized them for millennia. And somewhere in the expanding wave of stellar radiation, the sacrifice of 50,000 humans continued to echo across the galaxy, carrying with it a message that would be remembered until the stars themselves burned out. When the universe needed heroes, the Deathworlders had answered the call.